at Carbon 5. I've been doing design for about 10 years. I've done kind of like different parts of design, and throughout it all, I found that if I skipped on my process, both the client and I failed miserably. So I kind of outlined some of the things that have worked for me in my process. There's been the ideal workflow, I guess, here. And then sometimes there's been bits and pieces that have gotten removed. But in an ideal world, this is what my process normally looks like. So I kind of like to start off with this quote, and it's something that I don't know if, I feel like most designers do not agree on this, but I feel like the computer is probably not the best place to start. So it's actually a really old designer, I'm sure most of you know him, Milton Glaser, and he's been quoted to say, the greatest liability to the computer is that a lot of weak ideas are very well developed. The computer clarifies things too quickly. And I think it's this idea of just jumping into beautiful finished design before you really thought about your process. So the first thing I like to do with any project, silly, but I like to vacuum my desk with my trusty mushroom vacuum that I have. I always feel like my desk is a really great reflection of my brain. If it's not clean, if it's not clear, and I'm starting a new project, it's not really, like, I'm just not going to be as effective. The other thing that I really like to do before I dive into a client project is what I call the method acting to good design. And it's really jumping in and learning about the client and really spending the time to find out about this client before you get onboarded to the project. Because a lot of times I think you get to this part where you're not really, you're jumping into the experience of all of those people involved in the project as opposed to just having an idea of what the product is or what the client is before you jump into it. So I like to use the product. I've had like a great history of working in fashion, and right now I'm working on weed maps, so that's kind of why the bong's up there. But I feel like with any sort of project that you work on, really immerse yourself and really learn as much as you can about what it is, who your users are, and how you can experience the product as a user. And then in the beginning of a project, I feel like I've been a witness to this where a lot of times you start at a new job or you start at a new project and your initial instincts are like, let me tell these people everything I know and let me tell them like all the things I can do. And I found like over the years, the more I spend time listening to people in the beginning and just trying to absorb as much information from the client, from stakeholders at the company I work at, I make a lot better decisions and choices in what I say and what I suggest. So I would suggest listening in the beginning. Then test out the waters, you know, like do user testing, try and do workshops with the clients, with stakeholders from your company, just to get an idea of what everybody thinks of, whether it's the product, whether it's some sort of like advertising idea you're selling, just see what the consensus is and what people feel like, who are they selling to, what is it that they're looking for, who are these clients, get kind of a consensus of what people think. And this is a great time to ask questions that other people might be in like meetings afraid to ask because it's not really, you know, you think, oh, this might be a stupid question, but I think in that sort of scenario, it's a great time to ask a lot of things. Did it stop working? The next step, I like to go out into the wild and really see actual customers. So it's nice to do customer interviews if you have the option to do them. You might not. It's good to do beta testing if you're working on a product. That's always really nice. But a lot of times, again, you don't have that access to that information. Analytics is great. If you don't have that, try and just go out and talk to people that you know. Like, chances are you know enough people that somebody in your social network or family network falls into some sort of group of what you're looking for. And they're a good way to start. Like if you don't have a lot of information on hand, that's, I always think, a great place to start. From there, kind of look at what overlaps between what your clients' goals are, what your customers' goals are, and kind of look at what overlaps between those two, because I think you'll be able to identify things that both parties believe is important in your product. I think it's like a really good way, especially in product design, to identify key features that you want to build into the product that you're working on, because you'll start to see things will just manifest themselves that everybody's on board with. The next step is really be prepared, and I think a lot of this goes back to like the technology of what you're working on. So right now I'm working on an Android app. I had no clue about Android, like just absolutely nothing. I've always been on Apple products. I've never really like wanted to have an Android phone, so I went and got myself an Android phone. I sat and read through all the material design guidelines, kind of fell in love with it. It's an amazing design process. And I think in that ability, then when I was in meetings, when I was looking at things that I wanted to do, I could make best suggestions, best practice suggestions for what I was working on. This could even be like, I've applied this to even doing photo shoots for fashion companies. It's like, I want to work with a certain kind of lighting. I know I want to get a look. I try and do the same thing where I research it and make sure I know what I'm talking about. Then this is really where my process is probably the most prevalent, because I actually stay away from the computer as long as I possibly can. I spend a lot of time sketching, wireframing, doodling, mind mapping, because I think this is a great time to actually identify worst case scenarios. I think when you move into beautiful finished design, a lot of times you design for best case scenario and not worst case scenario. So getting a room of people together to do wireframing, to do comping, to put up sticky notes, like you're going to address so many more problems that way than just moving to a finished design. And then from there, because this is something that I get caught up in quite frequently, visual research, I love to go on Dribbble. I love to go on sites where I see best designs. And I try to put this towards the end of my process because I feel like by the point that I get to it, I have a strategy for what I want to do. So I have exact areas that I want to explore. I'm not spending as much time diddle-daddling about what's beautiful. And that's when I move to the computer with kind of a little bit of confidence that I know I'm doing thoughtful design. So even my process on the computer is kind of pen and pencil. I use a Wacom tablet for everything. Yeah, so that's kind of my process.